This is Mary. Welcome to the IHC Craft Room.
In today's video, I'm going to show you how I made this 15-ounce candle inspired by Valentine's Day. Smells like champagne and strawberries. Ooh la la. Grab all your stuff and let's get crafty. For materials today, we're going to be using Freedom Soy Wax and some Stabilo 20 Wicks, Wick Stickums, of course, and we'll be using red liquid dye for Valentine's Day, a 15-ounce clear luxe vessel, and two 30 ml strawberries and champagne fragrance oil. So romantica. For tools today, we'll be using some parchment paper, some paper towels, a piece of paper, a small saucepan as a double boiler, a pot holder, a kitchen scale, a small pour pot, a 5-ounce glass measuring cup, a temperature gun, wick centering tools. I picked these up at Michael's. Or clothespins and dowels. We'll see which ones we end up using. A pencil, a marker, some scissors, a pair of rubber gloves, and a stir stick. When I make candles, I always start with the part that will take the longest, which is melting the wax, of course. So first I'm going to get my water boiling on a low simmer, and then I'm going to measure out my wax. As I've mentioned in the past, it's important to make sure that you zero out your scale so that you're not accidentally incorporating the weight of the small pour pot with the weight of the wax, because that will totally screw up your candle formula. This is a 15-ounce vessel, and the Village Crafting Candle website recommends a wax fill of 13 ounces for this vessel. And from my last experiment, I can tell you that that's bang on. I'm going to be using 360 grams of wax, which is just shy of 13 ounces. But again, don't forget about the fragrance oil. It will make up the difference. This wax has a maximum fragrance load of 10%, so I'm going to be using 36 mils of fragrance oil. And again, you'll notice that my scale is on grams because I'm too lazy to go back and forth. This is not news if you've watched one of my videos before, so let's just move on. You'll notice that I've covered my scale with a piece of paper towel and parchment paper, and I'm wearing gloves. This all comes back to the same thing in the end. I want my candles to smell like strawberries and champagne, not my hands or my table. If you're more precise and careful than I am, feel free to go on without them, but I definitely cannot, so here we are. So before we go any further, I want to make sure that I know exactly how this wax is supposed to be handled so that I don't do anything wrong. So I'm on the Village Crafting Candle website right now, and it shows here that I should be heating my wax to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, mixing in fragrance up to 10%, and pouring into room temperature jars, all of which I am set to do, so we are good to go. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to double check my wick placement. I've done this in the past in a previous video where I show you this bot in more detail, but I'm just gonna hop around through it because I do know how to use it, and I'm sure you've seen this previously before. But basically, I'm just trying to confirm that I have the right wicks for what I need and the right setup of how I'm going to use my wicks. So here it shows this diagram, which is exactly what I was looking for. I'm going to do the peace sign version with 3 Stabilo 20 wicks, which is part of the recommended options that I should be testing. So I'm going to start with the Stabilo 20 in this configuration and see how it works out for me. It's time to prep the wicks while we wait for the water to come to a simmer. I'm going to start by wiping the bottoms off to make sure that there's no debris or anything stuck to them. And then I'm going to stick them directly onto this Wick Stickums and make sure that they're really well adhered to them. Next, I'm going to work on something that I've never tried before. The last time I made a 15-ounce candle, I set up my wicks completely incorrectly. So this time I'm going to try to do this peace sign configuration, but I wanted to see if I can make myself a little stencil to help me out with that. I started off with a piece of paper and then just tried to make it fit the interior of the vessel by tracing it on the base of the vessel and then cutting a bit off to account for the width of the vessel walls. I'm going to draw the peace sign into my stencil and then try to eyeball the center of each section so that I can place a little mark there and poke a hole through the paper so that I have enough room to use my marker on the base of my vessel. I'm really just using this as a guide so that I don't make my wicks sit too close to each other or too close to the vessel walls. And you'll see that I ultimately adjust them a little bit, but I ended up being pretty happy with where my wicks were placed. So all in all, this was successful. Now that I have my red dots to guide me, it's time to secure the wicks to the base of the vessel. Even though this is a wide mouth 15-ounce vessel, my big man hands still don't fit in there well enough to push those wicks firmly down at least. And you think I would have learned, but I just don't. So once again, I'm going to use my stir stick to help secure the wicks to the base of my vessel. Cause what's Mary's big fear, kids? That's right, it's floating wicks. So since I've never used 3 wicks in a 15-ounce vessel before, I have no idea how to get the wicks to stay perfectly upright. So I'm kind of trying with these wick centering tools, but they just keep falling in and causing a disaster. And I'm just thinking, can you imagine when there's melted wax in there and then these things go falling inside? I think I'd lose my mind. So I decided pretty quickly that these were just not gonna work for me. And I moved on to trying with the dowels and clothespins. That was a little bit touch and go, but I ultimately figured it out and I think it's gonna work well. This wax is almost fully melted, so I'm gonna put my gloves back on and get ready to pour my fragrance oil and liquid dye in as soon as I get the wax off the burner. The temperature is currently 185 degrees Fahrenheit, and this wax really just needs to be melted to about 160. So I'm gonna go ahead and start pouring my fragrance oil in and adding my liquid dye. I'm hoping to get a really vibrant red for this Valentine candle. So I'm gonna be using 7 drops of red dye. I've never used red dye before, so I'm not sure if that's gonna give me the color I want, but fingers crossed. I'm gonna give this a stir to make sure that the fragrance oil and the liquid dye are fully incorporated, but I'm gonna do my best to not over stir and introduce air into my wax. That would just be a big bummer. Even though I'm trying a number of new things while making this candle today, by far the hardest part for me is waiting for this wax to cool down to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It got to the point where I was just trying to cool this thing down by moving it around, blowing on it, and that's what we call impatience, my friends. But if anybody was wondering, I ended up pouring it at about 162 degrees, which is an accomplishment, frankly, so I'll take it. All right, now it's time to adjust the wicks so that they are as straight as possible using these clothespins and resting them on the dowels. I feel like this is kind of like the equivalent of fluffing a bow on a wreath for me. I mean, I could mess around with these wicks, making them straight probably forever. But eventually the wax is gonna solidify and ruin my fun. So I need to make sure that these wicks are as straight as possible before that happens. Okay, I think these came out as straight as I could have hoped for. So I'm super jazzed with the way they look right now. Let's keep our fingers crossed that they stay this straight as the wax sets. It's now been 24 hours since I poured this candle and it has set very nicely. I honestly cannot believe how smooth the top of this candle is. It is a night and day difference between Container Soy Wax and Freedom Soy Wax in terms of the tops. I've got no real cracks, no sinkholes, and a super smooth top. Now let's talk about glass adhesion. I'm not seeing any wet spots. There's no pulling away from the sides of the vessel at all. And no frosting, even though I've added color to this soy wax. I can honestly say I'm totally impressed with Freedom Soy Wax. Hands down, much easier to work with than Container Soy Wax when it comes to the finish, no doubt about it. Now let's light this baby up and see if we get to the edge of the vessel with our melt pool. Generally speaking, I'm a bit of a rule follower, but I broke one of the biggest rules of soy candles by not letting this cure for 2 weeks before lighting it. Please do not call the soy candle police. I definitely can't make bail. I'm gonna let this burn and keep an eye on it and see how long it takes for the melt pool to get to the edge of the vessel, assuming it does. And it really better because, hello, 3 wicks. We are just 25 minutes in here and the melt pool is quickly creeping to the edge of the vessel already. And here we are at less than an hour burning and the melt pool has fully covered the surface of my candle. And let me tell you, even without curing this candle for 2 weeks, the hot throw is fantastic. Strawberries and champagne, anyone? Yes, please. The one thing I do have to say is a total bummer for me is that I didn't manage to get that vibrant red color that I was looking for. But I love me some pink, so I'm not complaining. I mean, I am, but I'm not. Thank you for joining me on this romantic strawberry and champagne filled stroll through soy candle making. Don't forget to use code IHC5 for 5% off your entire purchase of candle supplies at Village Craft and Candle. If you enjoyed this tutorial from a beginner, then subscribe to my channel so that we can continue to get crafty together. Toodaloo!